but you are getting some height, some offset here. So you could even go lower profile, but this is actually pretty low profile, which is why we got rid of the RGB RAM. But the thing is that we have tested it with like just RAM sticks, and there was no difference in terms of temps if it was like straight across or even like this. So it does a pretty good job of cooling even with this height of an offset. So what I'm going to do now is I'm literally going to tuck these in here. And this does actually have a splitter. I guess I forgot to get it out of the box. So it's just one of those things that, yes, you are gonna have to raise for RAM height. Forgot to get my, I don't think it's in here. Oh, there it is, yep. That's what I was looking for right there. Okay, so that's all squared now. Okay, so the last thing I grabbed out of here was the braided cable that I'm going to use to essentially split these. And then these are going to run into the single CPU fan, and I'll show you the connection for that here in a second. Now what I'm doing right now is just tucking these under. By the way, people are always wondering, like, hey, is that gonna melt the cables or anything like that? The answer is no. There's no issue with the cables. The cables can totally be tucked under here and not have a problem. So I'm just literally stacking these underneath. I do want to get them off the RAM though. There's a lot of heat pipes, so. There you go. Just making sure that the tuck is all the way in. Nothing is, so there you go. Okay, so now when you look at my build, you can see there's no cables, you can't see them. I'll show you via roaming. Okay, so what I did here, as you can see, that I basically tucked all of my cables into this section underneath, right? Off of the side of the RAM, and then all I have. So there's like very, very little cable that you can actually see. It just makes it a whole lot easier. And then what you end up with a single clean build. And then for the plug I plugged it into, it's this one here on the right, which is your CPU cable. So the one over, and then this is, because it's in a splitter, this will basically run both fans. So you can see it's right up against the edge of the RAM. So it's sitting along the top of the RAM, so that's all your clearance in the entire board. So now we are squared there. Well, that's why we don't have RGB RAM. And understand, Naveen, this has like, you're not gonna see, this is a simple build, no frills, just making it really easy. So at this point in time, like in terms of just time and everything like that, it's pretty simple what we've just been able to accomplish given the amount of time. The next thing we're gonna do now is we're actually gonna grab our PSU. And you're like, what? This is the part that I was telling you about that's a little bit different, but this is what I normally do that you guys don't see, but this is what I'd recommend doing. So this is like a step-by-step, soup to nuts, taking you through the entire process. We're gonna grab our 850 watt PSU. Then for cables, we're gonna grab one CPU cable. We're gonna grab our PSU cable. Do the Drew, thank you for the resub. Zig PC, thank you very much for the 5 gifted subs, by the way. GL Rods, thank you very much for the sub as well. And Zig PC for the other sub. So we're grabbing our motherboard cable. And then the last cable we're gonna grab is actually our 16 pin. And then you would grab your power cable, but I have one outside of that. So we're gonna grab our PSU. And I'm gonna grab my 16 pin connection. And then these are all the cables I'm gonna take out for now. Let me put this away. Oops. No, this goes in the AIO. There we go. Okay, so what we're gonna do is just move this out of the way for now. We're gonna take a drink. Okay, so we're gonna take our PSU cable here. We're gonna connect that right here on our 24 pin. Just like that. We're gonna take our CPU cable. We're gonna plug that up here into our CPU. Either one is fine. If you wanted to connect both, you could. I don't bother. You don't need to. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my 16 pin and plug that in here. Take my PSU cable, plug that in here. Take this, plug this in here. Then take our CPU and plug it in right there. Okay? And that's going to sit just like this. So there's my PSU. And then the last thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go grab my GPU. To make sure that my motherboard is all the way up against the edge. I'm going to take my GPU and I'm going to plug it in right on top here, just like that. I'm going to take my 16 pin connection. I'm literally just going to plug it in right here. And now the question is, guys, will it post? So we'll let you guys answer that while I plug this in and get this all hooked up to test. So the question is, will it post? Because this time, we don't know. We didn't test it. So we'll let that run for a second. Now while we're waiting for that to run, I'm basically plugging in network, I'm plugging in power, and then I'm going to take my mouse and my keyboard and I'm going to plug those in too. And this is what we're doing right now is called breadboarding. Even though we would measure with a banana, this time we're breadboarding. Okay, so we're gonna plug that in. And what we wanna do, what we're testing right now and why we're doing this, is that you want to make sure that all of your components work before you put them inside of the case. We haven't even gotten to that part yet, Jenkins. Okay, so we're gonna go to there. Get that plugged in. So what we've plugged in so far is our mouse, our keyboard, and our power. So everything's kind of plugged in there. But one thing we're gonna do before we get to that is we're gonna pop over to here onto a laptop, another desktop, or anything like that. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go and I'm gonna search for MSI Z790 Tomahawk Wi-Fi DDR Tomahawk Max. Max Wi-Fi. I'm going to search for that. And then I'm going to go to this right here, which is the Wi-Fi here. So I'm going to make sure this is my board. I'm going to hit accept. I'm going to go to support. Right there. I'm going to go to BIOS. And you see where it says AMI BIOS. This is all there. The latest release was 11.02. I'm going to download this BIOS. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a flash drive. Take a flash drive. I'm going to plug this in. I'm going to open this file. I'm going to go here to my flash drive, MSI. I have all of these ones that I've used. So I'm going to go to Z790, so I don't have one, I don't think. So I'm going to go ahead and grab make a new directory, copy that. Open this. And I'm going to go back to that folder I had, open this up. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to put this in this folder. And why I'm doing this, guys, is because I'm making sure when I make sure the system boots up, that everything works, all that sort of stuff, I want to update the BIOS. We're going to install Windows. We're going to do all of that outside of the case. We're going to make sure it all works and that it's all good to go before we even put it inside the case. Because when it's like this, it's much easier to work on. It's much easier to test things. If you get if some component's broken, you can swap it out, test it, make sure, find out what works, and all that sort of stuff. So a much easier state, and then to easily unplug things versus doing this inside of the case. Yeah, these are refresh boards, so this one will work right out of the case. Yeah, like we won't have any problem there. Okay, so going back to the capture, we're gonna go here, click on this, hit eject mass storage. That'll give us our thing from there. We're gonna go to top down. We're gonna take our NVMe drive, our flash drive, we're gonna plug that in. And then the last thing I gotta do now, grab our HDMI cable and plug that into right there as well. Okay, so everything is good to go. Now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go to the roaming here. Make sure my PSU is on. Okay, so I'm gonna click this on. And I'm gonna take a screwdriver. And then in this JF1, you're gonna basically take a screwdriver, unless you don't have a power supply, you're gonna take a screwdriver and you're gonna put it on these two ends, just like that. And then that turns the PC on. So I basically just jumped the PC, and now you can see it's actually all on. I touched it, and now the PC is on. So now we're gonna test, and you can see everything powers up. Now the question is, will it post? So we're gonna watch and see. So now we wait. Oh, that's a good sign. We're gonna start hitting delete. There it is, F1 to run setup. Okay, so we are now posted, so it did post. So now we're inside. We're gonna get into the BIOS. Now a couple things we're gonna do. This first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go to flash right here. M flash, you hit yes. And it's gonna restart. Yeah, I want to give you guys the full rundown as well. So this is what you should be doing if you're doing a new PC. These are steps you should take, because doing stuff like this basically makes sure your power supply works, your graphics card works, your cooler works, everything works, again, while you're ensuring that the system is good to go. So now what we're gonna do, we're gonna jump down here to our MSI. We're gonna go find our Z790 Tomahawk Max. Click this. I know it's the same one we already have. I'm just running through because I've already updated. We've used this before, but I'm essentially updating my BIOS now. So I'm going to flash the BIOS with the latest BIOS, so the latest BIOS flash right now.
If you're not using your refresh board, you'll need to make sure your board has QFlash Plus or Flashback to update your BIOS for 14th gen support.
Well, this BIOS, the reason it took so long is because this BIOS was actually already on that version. I'm just showing you the steps. So yours, when you do this, if you're following along and you want to build this exact same build, you would just know that it was going to take a little bit longer. So this is not indicative of how fast it is. And somebody says, I've never updated a BIOS, I'm too scared. You should not be too scared to update a BIOS. However, here's the deal. If everything is working fine on your system, you don't need to update your BIOS. Like, that's the whole thing. Is a BIOS is not something like a Windows update or anything like that where you're like, I need to get and make sure I update every BIOS. That's actually not true. You should only update a BIOS when you're seeing things like, I'll update BIOSes when I'm seeing some instability with RAM. And the other thing too is that as you use your PC, you might see some of that instability. That's where a BIOS update will actually do things like, as RAM compatibility or microcode updates show up in BIOSes, it's worth basically doing that refresh or whatever, or updating your BIOS in this case. So, but what we're going to do, again, that's where it's important to know what's going on in your BIOS and pay attention. Where you might see this be something more frequent in this case might specifically be because, and this is the big caveat, if you are an early adopter, say for instance you've done a Z790 Max board, or you're getting into 15th gen or Ryzen 8000 series, BIOS updates actually can do things like performance updates, etc. for your CPU. So updating your BIOS, especially if you're an early adopter, may be more imperative versus if you are a late adopter or you're coming into a much more mature platform where BIOS updates end up not being that big of a deal. So, I like doing it via the mFlash just because I always like UEFI doing it from within. I know that there are some that you can do it via UEFI inside of like apps and stuff on the system. I always like it better when you do it from the BIOS. It just feels less prone to error. And absence of logic, that is absolutely true. Like right now, if I was to lose power right now, luckily all of these are on a UPS. I can show you the UPS here in a minute. I'm just trying to get into the BIOS. Okay, so when you see here, I'll just show you. And this is always important. Somebody was bringing up. This is a really key part, right over here in the corner. Is you can actually see it right there. There is our UPS, our APC UPS, which is a battery backup. So should something actually go wrong, that basically keeps the whole. We have a number of these sitting in the studio. So should something actually happen, we can actually, and the power goes out, we never end up bricking anything like that. So, all right, so let's go to capture. The next thing I'm gonna do, and this is something that you can do or not, I like to do it, I'm gonna go to F7, I'm gonna go to settings, I'm gonna go to advanced, and I'm gonna go to, oh, you know what, it might not be, where is it in this one? Oh, actually it might be in simple. Storage. No, where is it? Sorry, I gotta remember where this is. It's different for everyone. Settings.
Are you looking for the cooler setting?
No. I'm looking, there it is. So go to settings, go to secure erase, hit yes. And I'm gonna boot into another tool. This is, if you want, like, especially if you're doing a new system, you're using an old drive, an OS drive, anything like that, I go into secure erase and I essentially will erase this. This is a NVMe drive, already has Windows on it, all that sort of stuff, but I want to show you guys the entire process, so I'm going to erase the drive. So here it is, you can see I'm in secure erase now. I'm gonna go to the 1 terabyte and I'm gonna erase that drive. Not the second drive. The second drive already has games on it, and I wanna make sure we can still benchmark stuff. So there we go, it's done. And now I'm gonna reboot this. And then, Org alluded to it already, now I'm gonna go and I'm gonna make sure that my cooler is set for box cooler, which is gonna be super important for this build, and make sure that I'm at Intel stock settings. So we're gonna do that next. Hey, trying to teach you guys everything. So this is like the whole process that you should do when you're basically doing a build for sure. Okay. So now we're in the build. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to advanced here. We're gonna go to settings. We're gonna go to overclocking. And then we're gonna go down here to where it says water cooled, and we're gonna change that to box cooler. The main reason for this is notice next to it, it says 253 watts, 288 watts, 4,096 watts. We basically need to make sure that this is at stock settings, which is 253 watts, and that it will keep it. Basically, this will keep our system from getting out of control from cooling. Which, if we're going to do a box cooler, we absolutely need to do. The other thing I'm going to do, and if you want to know how to set up a Windows flash drive, we actually have a guide for that we'll link here in a minute. But this is a Windows flash drive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this. I'm going to plug this in now. And we're going to install Windows while this is all boxed and set up. And again, this will test instability. If we need to do RAM changes or anything like that, it's still doing it while it's outside. Oh, there it is. Okay. The tower cooler one is for, they have a tower cooler and AIO one. We are doing the tower cooler, the box cooler. Okay, so we're back in capture here. I'm just gonna, now one thing I'm not gonna do, and I always recommend this when installing Windows, I'm not enabling XMP when installing Windows. I'm just gonna leave it with stack at 4,800 megahertz, and I'm good to go there. So I'm just gonna hit F10, and I'm just gonna, notice I changed my cooling down. I'm gonna hit yes, and then it's gonna restart. And now we've got our boot drive in, and now we're going to start the Windows installation. Yeah, if you wanted to do, if you didn't care, but I will be honest, people are asking about the water cooler. Here's the thing, I would rather, for me, I have a tendency to set it to box cooler, and then I use XMP, I use XTU, or I'll just basically set the settings on my own in the BIOS. I find the fine tuning on Intel specifically, you don't need that kind of wattage, and a lot of times you'll end up doing undervolting and then increasing wattage over time, versus just doing it with what it does in the BIOS, which lets it run rampant. Other thing too is that letting it run at just max crazy, a lot of time doesn't get you a higher Cinebench score, it just makes it a whole lot hotter and harder to cool. Yeah. Yes, you have to do this in ASUS as well. You'll set it to ASUS, it's actually called, it has a different setting we're showing you because this is build specific. In ASUS, it's basically setting it to enforce all stock settings and turning off what are called MCE or multi-core enhancement. Okay, so we're gonna hit next here, install now. You're very welcome, Mark. I am gonna hit, I don't have a product key. I'm gonna choose Windows 10 Pro because I just like Pro. And as you can see with VIP/CDK deals, it's like cheap. Hit next, go to custom. I'm gonna choose this one right here, drive 0, because drive 1 is my game drive. This is my OS drive, my Windows installation media. So I'm gonna hit next here, and then I'm just gonna let this finish. This is running Windows 11. So if I have an AIO cooler, so James, my recommendation is always to run the box cooler and run it at Intel stock settings. Because again, the difference in overall performance between the Cinebench on that and the Cinebench that you're gonna get if you're running it at max is maybe 1,500 points, but the cooling capacity is gonna be super maxed, and at the same time, the other thing too is that you're gonna see almost no difference of frames, especially if you're running at 1440p or 4K. Yeah. Yeah, James, that's always the thing. Is like I would leave it at box, and for most people, I don't let motherboards do their thing. I've seen very few that have been responsible with the amount of power that Intel actually needs, which is why, in some regards, don't get me wrong, Intel deserves the rap in terms of these things run hot. It's just not as bad as people are saying. Does that make sense? Yeah, Windows installs fast when you have an NVMe drive. Pull that out, and now we just wait for the rest. So org, that's what all of them do. They all default to MCE. I'm gonna reboot this. Yeah, that's the thing is like it used to be a lot more that way. It's not so much that way anymore. Which is why we do guides like this to show people that you don't necessarily mean to jam it with all the power in the world. There you go, IKEA, and it's really easy to find. So we're just letting the install finish. That's cool, Speed Race. Yeah, I do like the yellow dragon. And then once we're done with this, once this is all set up and we got everything in, the next step, guys, will be essentially getting this inside the case, which actually should be pretty quick. And then we'll go from there. I'm glad you guys are enjoying this. So like I want to do streams like this every once in a while and be a little smarter with builds so we can show you, so we can do a better job of showing you how to do setups and stuff like that. Like, so have these end-to-end, more builder-friendly, like new builder-friendly type builds. So that way you guys can see the whole end-to-end process. The one thing I have to be really careful about is that sometimes, especially if there's a lot of RGB or AIOs and stuff like that, is that this process it's usually hours of my time before we even get to a stream. It's Lucky. Okay, here we go. Go to yes. I'm going to skip the keyboard. Okay, it says gonna connect you to a network. So here's a little trick here, guys. When you see this, and it's always nice to have one of these on hand. If you end up with this little problem, there's two ways to get around it. There's the easy way, which is basically using a USB-C network connection, and then that'll work no matter what when you basically get this. Sometimes it's too new, it doesn't have the driver. But I'm going to show you a different way. So should you get into this, that if you have this problem, you don't feel like you're stuck. So we'll go to here, and you're going to hit Shift F10, and then what you're going to type, and I always try to remember this, and then I forget, but I have a screenshot of it for this reason. You're going to type here, you're going to type OOBE / bypass NRO. And OOBE means out-of-box experience, and then bypass NRO is basically telling you it's bypassing the network. So we're going to hit Enter. Oops. Bypass.
Check your flash.
Did I do it right? OOB. Oh, I did the wrong. Sorry. I know what I did wrong. Wrong slash. There we go. So you do, sorry, so / and then NRO. And then it'll reboot, and then we'll see this again. I do it so much, and it's funny, Icy Sniper, it's like one of those things, it's like, dude, I do this almost every, like a couple times a week, and I can still never remember the command. I can remember where front panel headers go, but this thing, it's like I always know Ubi because Ubi is out of box experience. But if I knew what bypass, if I knew what NRO meant, I would